Rankings.
Welcome back to the TPO Ranking Show. This is round 32 of the show. We're probably one or two shows away from wrapping up for the season, but we've still got a big show installed today. If this is your first time tuning in, well, welcome. This show is all about Australian football through the lens of the TPO rankings. We've got plenty of information on that on the website, but I'm sure you've got a good feel for it. It's like the FIFA World Rankings, I suppose, but for Australian football clubs. I don't put it together. I'm lucky enough to be joined by a man who has dabbled with the long black when it comes to coffee, but he hasn't quite given up the flat whites or the cappuccinos. Jake, how are you this evening?
Very well, thank you, Cody. And I will say that when I am at my works, I work for myself. For those watching at home, when I'm at the warehouse, I don't often have milk in the fridge. So on those days, I go the instant coffee black. So how's that?
Yeah.
I'll range from that all the way up to a flat white when it's on offer.
Okay, good to know, Jake.
Yeah, excellent.
Jake, tonight's show we've got a good question actually. I put it out late today. This is a Monday or midday today. On Instagram stories, asked a question. We've got a really good one in the middle of the show that's going to take up a good 5 to 10 minutes of discussion, sort of around a second division and promotion relegation. We'll get there soon. First of all, we got about 5 games to recap from the weekend. There was some massive games around the country, so the NPL and all that sort of stuff. So we'll touch on those first. We'll get into that question, and then we've got 3 big games upcoming this week. Actually, Jake, I'll have to get these out quick because light just turned off in my room, but all good here. We'll have to get them up quick because we've got 2 FFA Cup games that we'll be talking about, which are on Wednesday night. So I'll have to get this up on Tuesday. There we go. That's all sorted. But first of all, let's jump into, as the light just turns back on. Oh, this is going to be an interesting show, Jake. I've got a light
It's all
turning
happening.
on and off. Yeah. We'll jump into these games. So we had the Victorian NPL 2 Grand Final. It was Dandenong City versus Altona Magic. Altona Magic, we went in as favourites according to our system, and also to the supporters. 59% of the supporters voted for Altona Magic. But Dandenong City got up 3-1. Congratulations. And I believe they even had a man down for quite a while. I heard that somewhere anyway. But with that win, City are up 13 spots on the rankings to 60th. Altona, they fall 3 spots to 50th. I'll jump in with a couple more here. So we've got Cambertown City versus Sydney Olympic in the semi-final of the NPL final series. Sydney Olympic, we backed winning as favourites. The supporters, 69% of you guys also went for Sydney Olympic. But Campbelltown, and I think, Jake, what was it, last minute there or last minute or in injury time?
Penalty in injury time.
Got up. It was 2-1 in the end, wasn't it, Jake?
Yeah, so I'm just eating my biscuit.
No, you're right.
Talking there, but
all good.
2-1 in the end.
And with that win, Campbelltown up 2 spots to 15th. Well done. So they now move ahead of Central Coast Mariners. That's massive. So it's now actually 6 NPL clubs who are ahead of the Mariners. Sydney Olympic stay in at 14th for the moment. I guess their season is now over. A good season. Both those teams. No, Campbelltown. Sorry, that's one of our games.
They got one to
up.
go. Yep.
Yeah, against Lions. So we'll talk about that a bit later. I'll let you eat your biscuits, Jake. I'll keep going.
All right, I'll have a sip of my coffee tea as well.
Good stuff. So the NPL Victorian final, which was played Sunday, I believe. Yeah, Sunday. It was Heidelberg and Avondale. We voted for Heidelberg. The supporters, 53% tipped it over, the scales over to Avondale. Heidelberg got up 2-1. So we get that right. You guys get that wrong. Heidelberg stay in at 11th on the rankings. Avondale fall 1 spot to 13th. Slightly behind Wellington Phoenix. 2 games to go. Jake, you want to do these 2?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yep.
And I'm actually pulling up some messages here, Cody, which I sent you about this game in a minute. But before I get into that, we had the FFA Cup between Avondale and Sydney FC, and that was the midweek game there. The TPO rankings, no surprise, Sydney FC still ranked number 1 in the country. They were the favourites going in. This was probably a bit of a surprise, Cody, but the supporters, 60% of you thought Avondale would do it, which goes to show that people are confident that the NPL sides can cause an upset at the moment. And as those that were watching it will know that Avondale actually took it from 2-0 down, got it back to 2-2, went to extra time, but Sydney were too strong basically in that extra 30 minutes, and Sydney won that 4-2. And there was no real change to either side from a TPO rankings point of view there. It was an expected result. The last one, though, was the Victorian promotion relegation playoff between Green Gully and Moreland City. And so this one was a crazy game. I don't know if you caught any of it, Cody. I was watching the live stream, and Moreland City were 1-0 up for most of the game. They scored their second goal in about the 87th minute. So they were 2-0 up, and the commentators were talking about it being all over. Green Gully have been relegated. I'm just going to pull up, Cody, I sent you this message, which you probably... I sent you about 3, and you were obviously busy, so this probably, when you got to them, looked a bit weird. So at 2:18 p.m, I sent a message to Cody saying, Green Gully relegated. At 2:19, so 1 minute later, I said, maybe, injury times. They're still one goal down. And then at 2:22, so about 2.5 minutes later, holy, little bit of swearing, get onto the live stream. 2 goals in injury time to equalise, and then it went on to so Green Gully basically scored 2 goals in injury time to take it to extra time, and then they scored the winner about the 17th minute, so about 3 minutes from the end again. So Green Gully get up 3-2. They saved their season, stay in the NPL in Victoria. Disaster for Moreland City, who looked like they were about to be promoted to the top league, and they fell apart in those final minutes.
That sucks so
it
hard.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Obviously, well done, Green Gully.
Yep, absolutely. So in terms of the TPO rankings and the impact, Green Gully go up 2 spots there to 48. Moreland City fall 2 spots there, down in 73rd.
Jake, I was watching, actually started an Amazon Prime free trial, and I was watching a good show called Jack Ryan, and you'd like it.
Jack Ryan.
It's enjoying a lazy Sunday after a big weekend. So
missing out on all the excitement.
Yeah, apparently. So out of those 5 games, we got 3 right and supporters 1 right. So Jake, this proves our theory that the supporters usually just copy us, because this week on Instagram stories we didn't post our predictions or our probabilities. So there you go, supporters not faring so well there on the overall leaderboard for the season. We're on 70 and the supporters are on 63. So with only 3 games to go or so, I think
we better call it, Cody.
We can pretty much say we've won. But
better luck next year.
Better luck next year, yeah. Anyway, Jake, any other movements in the rankings?
Not so much rankings, just a few things to kind of point out. So Apia, Leichhardt from New South Wales, still the highest ranked NPL side at the moment, but they have one game that we're going to talk about, an FFA Cup game coming up. The 2 clubs closest to them are Bentley Greens and Heidelberg from Victoria. They both have an FFA Cup game coming up, so it'll be at least another week until we know which club will finish on top, I guess, or outside the A-League anyway, the highest ranked NPL club for the 2018. So maybe this time next week we'll know more about that. And obviously then there's Campbelltown and Lions, who are a little bit further down the rankings, but not too far behind. They've still got a game as well. The NPL Championship game is the one that I'm talking about there, Campbelltown and Lions. That'll be between clubs ranked 15th and 17th, so it should be quite a close game. And the other one as I was scanning down, and also based on the grand final in Illawarra Premier League, so the Football South Coast down there, Bulli had a grand final win. They scored, I think, in injury time as well, Cody, to win 3-2 over Wollongong United.
Yep.
And so they are up to 64th, and they're the highest ranked regional club in the TPO rankings. And that breaks, as you mentioned in our daily briefing, they broke their grand final hoodoo, first grand final win in a long time. And also that means that Bulli won the double there, and Coniston won the double in the second division in that football zone there in the district league.
Yep.
And that's the first time that both leagues, the club that won both leagues, has won the double in a very long time, apparently. So
there you go.
Do
they have promotion and relegation, Jake? Is that team?
They do. Yep. So 1 up, 1 down. So Coniston will go up into the Illawarra Premier League next year.
Good stuff. All right, part 1 done. Part 2. So I put this question out, and we've got a question from Corey Ando. 24, Corey _ Ando. I think he asked the question last week as well. But this week, Jake, we've been given the job by FFA to pick 12 teams to go into the new Division 2. So congratulations, we've got the job. Who and why?
Promoted,
now,
yeah.
Jake, obviously we could go on about this for ages, hours on end. And in fact, we might just do a standalone show in a couple of weeks, because Jake's written about this previously in a massive document. So I'm thinking about doing a bit of a Q&A with Jake on that. Dives into other issues than just this. But Jake, we've got 5 to 10 minutes here to talk about this, so we'll keep it brief. Did you want to?
I'll try.
Why don't you just jump in now? Obviously, we've had like not a long time to plan about this. Obviously, we haven't vetted the clubs, all this sort of stuff. So, Corey has actually asked to identify clubs and explain why. So we can do our best there, but I suppose the caveat is obviously if we had to decide, we would spend a bit more than 5 minutes considering it. Jake, why don't you lead us off? Because I've got my thoughts here written down as well, but I know you're much more. You've thought about this more. You're much more articulate, and I'll just maybe jump in at the end if or along the way.
Geez, you're setting me up for failure here, Cody, talking me up like that.
Yeah.
So we'll go into it in another week, more detail, but I guess the way that I would first answer the question before I go into the detail of which clubs, is to say I would, at least in year one, it would obviously have to be set up the right way and there'd be some sort of application process. And I am of the opinion that there needs to be some criteria for a second division that clubs would need to meet at a minimum, at least to start with, and they would be things that basically are tied to or indicate that a club is a professional club. So the point being that we want it to be set up in a way that clubs that are getting promoted into this league need to keep improving their facilities, the administration, the coaching, all those things to kind of show that they deserve to be there. So at a starting point, these clubs would need to meet that, in my opinion. So in saying that, when I get into some of the club names, I don't know enough about some of these interstate or clubs outside of Queensland in terms of their facilities or stadiums and that sort of thing. So some of the clubs I mentioned might not have those things in place, but if there's a second division come or announced tomorrow, then probably a number of these clubs would go out and figure that sort of thing out. I've kind of changed my mind on it a little bit as to whether it should be all 100% existing clubs or whether you could allow for new franchises. I don't know, Cody. I'm still going back and forward. I think at least in year one, when this competition is set up, it should be open to some new clubs, at least to apply and show why they meet the criteria. And the criteria would need to be set out very plainly, very clearly. Everybody, including the public, knows what they are, and it's not this ambiguous process. So, and I guess the reason I say that is because a couple of reasons. One, there could be some investors that want to bring in a lot of money and they want to do it that way. If that's the case, then they can show why their club deserves to be there more than another in a fair process. I'm not necessarily against that, and that's not saying I'm on board with some of the current A-League bids, because I think some of those are not open and better than other options. But also some of the regional areas, like I'd like to think in, say, Tasmania, somebody like a South Hobart or a Devonport City could step up. Or in Canberra, a Belconnen or a Canberra FC could step up and go into a second division. Maybe they can't, though. I'm not sure. I don't know enough about those areas as to whether those clubs would want to or have the facilities and the backing to do it by themselves, or whether they would need like a Canberra, like they're doing with the A-League. They need a regional sort of bid. And that's where I would say, if it means that we get a club in Canberra, maybe that's what we need. I'm not 100% sure on that, Cody, anyway. So I guess I'm just saying, I think at least to start with, open it to existing and new, and let's have a look at what our options are, subject to meeting those criteria. And probably one of the more important things, which hasn't been talked about in this A-League expansion, is I think any applicant needs to basically be asked the question, do you support an open system, and are you happy to be subject to promotion relegation? And if the answer is not 100% yes, then get them off the table and out of the way. So that's kind of the things that I think about.
Are you saying that, Jake, in terms of for the possibility of a Division 3 and 4 later on?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I didn't want to go into too much detail. I think there should be a Division 2 and a Division 3. And I'll leave that as a bit of a teaser. I know it sounds crazy, but there's some logic behind it based on the way that the Japanese league, the J-League, J2, J3 has been set up, which we might go into in another week. But yeah, I think as a starting point, these A-League bids, Cody, the reason I kind of mentioned that is I think somebody did ask the question of, maybe it was one of the Melbourne groups, whether they would be open to a second division coming in and relegation to that. And they basically said, no, we're not. Our bid doesn't exist, or it's not sustainable or feasible in a second division. And they copped a lot of slack for that, because then the kind of obvious question or feedback to that is, well, why do you then deserve to be there ahead of somebody else who can exist at any level of the football pyramid? So anyway, that's kind of just a long-winded way of telling you a bit about why the numbers I'm going to tell you now come into my head. I would, if we're talking about 12 clubs, I'm kind of going off the TPO rankings here as to how many should be in each, how many clubs from each state should be included. I'm of the opinion that you start it, obviously based on where the applications come from that are appropriate. But I would like to see most states represented, and then let promotion relegation decide the rest. If it turns out, I know one of the arguments people say is if it's just an open system, then you end up with just a New South Wales Victorian League. I think if that happens, who cares? Let it happen. I don't think it would happen, is the way that I look at it. I just don't see that happening. Mm-hmm. But if it did, it would be a short-term thing. Let it go. Yep. So I think most states should be represented. I've come up with some numbers here, Cody, and let me know if you think any of these stand out as crazy. I would go somewhere around 3 Victorian clubs. I'd say 3 New South Wales, and probably that would include Northern New South Wales, however you wanted to split that. I'd actually go 2 South Australia based on the TPO rankings, where a lot of the South Australian clubs are and how well they've done in the FFA Cup. And then I'd probably split the rest somewhere. Queensland, WA, Tasmania, ACT would all get a club each, and I think that rounds us out to about 12. So that would be kind of my split. In terms of the clubs themselves, Cody, this is where it kind of gets a bit... doesn't really mean anything, but it's interesting to think about. So,
it's hard to say, Jake, isn't it? I mean, we don't know if this was real, what clubs, what their bids would look like, what their facilities, their financial models, all that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
That would be the big process, wouldn't it? You'd set up this and you have the framework, and then you go into each club. But for shits and giggles, Jake, for just a bit of fun.
Give you some names?
Yeah.
Well, I think so I'll give you some names. I think when we talk, just what I was talking about, meeting certain criteria, I think one of the things that would need to be factored into that is recent performances, because I don't think to start with you can simply take the premier from each state and make it as easy as that, which would be great, but I just don't think it would work quite like that. But if you've got a club that's been successful over a number of years and they're applying and it's between them and another club that hasn't been successful or as successful, I'd say you kind of have to go with the one that's been winning trophies. So, I'm kind of looking at a list over on my other screen here, which is why I'm glancing off to the side, but I think the obvious ones are the ones that have been successful this year and in recent years. So Apia, Leichhardt, Sydney Olympic kind of have to be up there. You'll have your Heidelberg and your Bentley Greens from Victoria, and if we're talking a third, then obviously this year you're looking at an Avondale, but it's hard to go past at least facilities and history-wise a club like even a South Melbourne potentially, although obviously not this year being a particularly good one for them. South Australia, I would say Adelaide City, and I'd love to see a Campbelltown City given how well they've done this year, but again, I don't know enough about facilities and backing and that sort of thing. Queensland is, given that's where we are, becomes...
West Adelaide had a bid, didn't they? They pulled out, or they weren't successful?
Yeah, they did have something in there. Yep, and obviously an ex-NSL club, so I think it's exciting when we talk about these names. You could probably rattle off about 25, 30 that you'd like to see in there. And the interesting thing about this is if it's all open and there's promotion relegation, there's the chance that any one of them could get in there at some point.
Yeah, so that's true. And Jake, what about a Wollongong Wolves or something?
Yeah, so if we're talking New South Wales, Apia is hard to go past based on the last couple of seasons and Sydney Olympic this year. Wollongong, I'd given they've got a lot of backing and they're putting their hands up for the A-League, they obviously think they can compete at that level, so I wouldn't be against that.
Queensland.
Even Sydney United, I guess, given maybe not this year, but previous years. Queensland's, like I said, interesting because we kind of know a bit more about some of these clubs. I am a fan of Lions, but whether they've got that, and they do have the backing, they've got the history, whether there's some weird, obviously the connection to Brisbane Roar might keep them out for whatever reason, I don't know, but I don't know, maybe a Lions, maybe an Olympic, even maybe a Western Pride, given their Ipswich, and they seem to be doing some really good things as well. What else?
What about a Gold Coast or a North or regional Queensland, Jake? We've tried that in the A-League.
Yeah, I don't think I'd put a regional Queensland in. I think if they win it through promotion, good on them. But otherwise, I think they'd struggle.
Yeah.
Even Gold Coast, I'd rather see a Brisbane or two Brisbane, an Ipswich and a Brisbane club.
Yeah.
And if Gold Coast compete their way into it, great. But leave it at that. And then what else?
Australia.
Western Australia. I guess Perth Soccer Club being the obvious one, given their year this year.
City put a bid in, didn't they?
Yeah, there was something over there, and there was like a bid from the from Football West, I think, was attached to it for a little while. it's hard to know there whether it would this is kind of one of those areas where do the existing clubs have what it takes to be at that professional level, or does it need to be another regional or centralised bid? I'm not sure. Tasmania, I think, would be great to have a team in there. I think there's probably, whether it's some sort of Tasmania United, that bid that they had for a little while for the A-League, which didn't pan out, but whether it's that, or I'd love to see South Hobart, given their history, or even a Olympia Warriors or a Devonport City get some backing.
Or the Hobart Zebras, Jake, the top I've got on this evening.
Hobart Zebras, if it can be made, obviously we're in their state they are now, maybe they're not up to it, but if they improve some things, get some money in behind them, you never know. And then ACT, again, I don't know if it's an existing club or not, but I'd love to see a team from Canberra in there. So that'd be the way I'd be looking at it. I think you're pretty much taking all the top clubs from each of the states and then 2 or 3 from some of them and going from there and let promotion relegation decide
and
it. And
the exciting thing, Jake, is that with these teams, if you actually had a second division laid out, you got your teams in, then all these backers for the other bids, say the MacArthur, the Team 11, you'd presume that if they weren't, over the whole footballing FFA BS, perhaps they'd turn their attention and money to these clubs who are, building for the future. And when they've actually got a club to point at and say we're striving for A-League, we're in this Division 2 now, we're going to be in the A-League within 3 years, we're improving our facilities, then they can actually go, okay, well, this is a real thing, I can put my money here, and those teams would flourish.
I think so. I think this is where the Tier 3, the third division that we kind of briefly mentioned, would come in, because I think if you're talking about a second division with promotion relegation to the leagues below it, it would be very difficult to get a brand new club with millions of dollars behind it to go into a league like that, knowing that they could lose their spot in year 1 down to a state league. And I think that's why a third division gives that buffer. So to me, division, obviously the A-League's professional, second division would need to be fully professional, and the third division is where you have that transition between some clubs that want to be professional and have the money and are spending it, and those that are not quite there and they're more state league clubs but they're finding their feet and that sort of thing, and that kind of gives that buffer zone and a spot where some clubs that really have the ambition to go up to the top tiers can build and do that, and those that are falling down and don't quite have what it takes or need a break year or whatever it is, have that division there to kind of fall to.
Yeah, Jake. And obviously, guys listening at home, watching at home, you can tell Jake could talk forever about this. We've gone over the 10 minutes.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Corey_Endo24. Thanks for opening that can. But that's just a teaser, Jake, and maybe we can certainly... The big question there is financial stability or viability, and can the leagues, can the clubs survive? We will touch on that sort of stuff. Perhaps next week I'm planning on maybe getting down to Brisbane. We can do an in-person recording where I can drill Jake about his big vision document, which I'll put up once he's updated. I'll put onto our new website, tporankings.com.
Yep.
So look for that in a couple of weeks, guys.
And Cody, before you move on, I know I kind of took up the whole spot there, but I'm just kind of looking through some of your notes, and it looks like you've managed to get most of your stuff in. Did I miss anything?
No, I was very rough, Jack. I just quickly put it down there, some thoughts, and you really, I was banking on you coming out full force with your knowledge and your words, and you did, and I was happy you did, and I couldn't set it by myself, but obviously it really does come back down to what the bids look like. If this process was in actuality, it'd be good to see the bids and where all the clubs come from.
Imagine as well, Cody, can I just throw it out there that whether it's a Division 2 and Division 3 or not, if you have a promotion relegation between or up and down from that down to the current kind of state leagues, the MPLs, imagine the importance that this MPL championship takes on, where the winner, this league that we've got, the final series where we've now got Campbelltown playing Lions. Imagine if there was a promotion spot on the line with that game where the winner goes into the second division. Yeah, that would just be incredibly important. Yeah, whereas people are enjoying it at the moment. You might get a decent crowd down at South Australia this weekend, but if it was attached to promotion relegation, you get Lions fans travelling down. It'd be the whole thing. I'd bloody go down for it. So it'd be really exciting. So yeah, I totally agree, Jake. And we will certainly talk about that in the future. So thanks again for your question. Jake, while we're on Campbelltown Lions, I'm going to jump in. We've got 3 games, part 3 to wrap this up, previewing. So Campbelltown City versus Lions, MPL.
final series, grand final. Campbelltown, it's hosted in South Australia on Sunday. I believe it's 5 p.m. kickoff. I heard Lions have got some sort of wedding or function, a lot of the players on the Saturday. So whether that means there'll be some weary heads and hungover, I'm not really, or maybe it was the Friday, I'm not exactly sure. But no excuses. Anyway, Campbelltown going as favourites. We've got them at 44% probability of winning. They're 15th on the rankings compared to Lions at 17th. There's not much between them, but obviously, again, that being at home, being in South Australia, and Lions, if they are sort of hungover, that might come into it. But I'll be interested to watch that one. And as I said, I believe it's Sunday 5 p.m. So, Jake, I might even be at your place for that one. That should be good. Jake,
that'll be on live stream as well. So
live
if you're
stream.
sitting at home, I think most of the other two games we're going to talk about are FA Cup, but that Campbelltown Lions definitely will be on the at least on the Hyundai A-League Facebook page. I think it'll be on some others as well, but definitely go and check that one out.
Yeah, should be a good one. Jake, you pick one of these FFA Cup games, and I'll wrap up with the third game.
All right, I'll pick the one that probably excites me the most, and that's RPR Leichhardt versus Adelaide United. Love these NPL versus A-League games, especially when it's a club like RPR and they've already knocked off Melbourne Victory. So, you got to give them a chance, and the TPO rankings algorithm gives them a reasonable chance here as well. So they're ranked 9th in the country. Adelaide ranked 4th at the moment. Adelaide's still favourites, even though they're away from home. We're giving them a 49% chance of winning. Apia, though, given 29% chance of winning. So not bad odds, Cody. Whether that is reflective of the way it turns out, I'm not sure. And it's also, just to preempt it a little bit, if Apia get up in this one, no doubt people start, every time an NPL club beats an A-League club, people start going, is this the biggest ever upset? We're giving Apia a 29% chance based on the strength of the clubs and the years that they've, the recent years they've had. So if Apia do win this, it'll be a fantastic win, but not even close to the biggest upset. So let's just put that out there right now. Let's not jump into it. Apia are a quality club, and I think many will expect them to push Adelaide in this one.
Yep. And Jake, if they do win, the most exciting thing about that, to me anyway, is that we will have 2 clubs out of 4 remaining being non-A-League clubs in the semi-finals. Yep. So, and Jake, definitely. Just by the way, do you know if it's a random draw or will they pair up?
It should be, and I'm pretty sure it's not.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it is seeded, so it will be NPL versus A-League in both of those games, which is really disappointing.
It is. It'd be good to have one of them in the final, wouldn't it? But you never know, Jake. I reckon.
Never know.
Out of those 2 games, we might get one upset. Well, might not even be an upset. Well, it would be an upset with the teams remaining. But anyways, this last game here, FFA Cup, is the all NPL affair, and it's Victorian. Bentley Greens, Heidelberg United, familiar foes here. Heidelberg ranked 11th. Bentley just above, like 8 points in the system, in at 10th. So Bentley Greens at home going as favourites. 43% probability compared to Heidelberg's 34. Big game, 3 massive games, and then on Wednesday night we'll get this show up nice and early on Tuesday and get the voting up for you guys on Tuesday as well. So Jake, that's the show for now. Anything else you want to sort of touch on?
No, just a reminder that we have our TPO Rankings daily briefing where we put out the little podcast, 1 to 2 minutes of all the Australian football news every single day. And we've been doing that. Geez, how long have we been going now, Cody?
It's good 2 or 3 months now, yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for those that listen every day to my boring tones or Cody's more slightly dulcet tones. What does dulcet mean, Cody? I don't even know.
I don't know.
Dulcet tones.
It sounds better.
Soothing tones, whatever. But if you're interested in that and you haven't heard about it, go over and check out if you go into our Facebook page and send us a message or something, we can point you in the right direction.
Absolutely. And if anyone's interested in what the TPO rankings are about, I literally just got this question on Instagram tonight, so I thought I'd mention it. We've written a blog on our website. It's under the main menu. It's called, a page, sorry. It's called How It Works. So we've actually explained that quite well there. So if you're interested in anything, or if you've got other questions, just send us a message. We're happy to help as we draw nearer to the end of the season, and we have confirmed it. We'll do one. No, we haven't confirmed it, have we, Jake? We're not sure yet.
We tried to figure it out, and then
it's one, and then we kind of want to do a wrap up after the last NPL team has played. So it might, depending how far the team's going in the FA Cup, we might wait till then. But anyway, thanks for watching round 32 of the TPO Ranking Show. We will see you next week. Thanks, Jake.
Thanks, Cody. See you guys.
Bye.